first storyteller tonight is a person who really understands what community means, and I was already banging on about it earlier. But Sean is a person who understands that he has a purpose in the community, he wants to give back to it, and he shares skills and knowledge and supports us whenever he can, and that's really the real idea of community, right? So please, can I get a round of applause for Sean and his first
I'm going to hold this. So we pulled into the parking lot at 15,000 feet at the base of Mount Cotopaxi. And the funny thing is Mount Cotopaxi isn't a mountain at all. It's an active volcano. It's actually the world's largest active volcano at 19,347 feet. Frank and I were going to attempt to summit this volcano in just a few hours. So Frank was my buddy from Ecuador. I met this guy a few months earlier in Quito on an exchange program when I was living there. And he was about 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds, wet, and shared a love of Van Halen and lifted trucks. And so that's how we met, hit it off. And Frank had invited me to accompany him up Cotopaxi. So most importantly, Frank was an expert in andinismo, which is the skill of alpinism, climbing, mountain climbing in the Andes. And he's very good at it. He had summited all of the major peaks in Ecuador multiple times. And so I was fortunate to accompany him on this. And I said, of course, heck yeah, let's do it. He said, Sean, it's muy duro. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And I said, sure, whatever. I was 19, I was invincible. I said, yeah, whatever, I'm sure I can handle it. And I didn't realize just how physically enduring it would be. So anyway, we pull Frank's lifted 93 Ford Bronco into the parking space at the parking lot here, right next to the llama pen. And I hopped out, stretched my legs, went over the fence, and I never met a llama in my life before in real life. And this would be the first and last time I would meet a llama. I walked up to the fence, and this creature came up and kind of sized me up, looked me up and down, and then spit on me. And so, yeah, that was the last time I talked to a llama. But no, we grabbed the gear out of Frank's truck, and we started to make our way up this 45-degree incline of scree and rock, loose rock, to the Refuge, where we would stay that night. And it was only 700 feet above us. It was at 15.7, but it would take us almost an hour to get up there because every 2 steps forward you took, you slid back a step. And so this was very demanding, climbing already, and it kind of hit me. This is like the first point at which I realized like this is going to be tough. I had acclimatized at 9,000 feet in Quito, living there for 5 months, but this was a whole new level, a different ballgame at 15,000 feet. So after about an hour, we made it to the Refuge. It was a very kind of unassuming shanty, ramshackle little house with about 20 other hikers in it. And unbeknownst to us, 4 months later, this structure would no longer exist. It would be taken out in an avalanche that actually claimed the lives of 13 of its inhabitants. So we didn't know it at the time, but we came in the building, saw 20 other hikers there at varying stages of gear and meal prep. And as the last 2 people to arrive, we had the worst pick of sleeping arrangements, so we spread our sleeping bags out under the dining room table and began to cook. I had brought 2 packages of ramen noodles, thinking 2 is better than 1. I could carbo load and have a little extra energy, and I would need every calorie for what we were about to do. So we tried to go to sleep that night. We would be leaving at midnight because of avalanche danger. You don't want to be out when the sun is up because every minute you're out, the sun is melting the snow, and you have a risk of avalanche. So we tried to get some sleep. I tossed and turned for hours. About the time that I was kind of drifting into the arms of slumber, I heard Frank's Casio wrist watch beeping at us, telling us that it was midnight and it was time to get up. So this was going to be a rough night. We put on all our gear. We had ice socks, crampons, boots, jackets, rope, you name it. It was a full deal. So we donned all this stuff and left into the cold night, walking out. If you think about what a volcano is, picture like Mount Fuji. It's kind of the iconic volcano. It's this concave, conical structure, right? Where at the base it's the least steep, and it gets steeper as you go to the top. So the first part of this climb was actually fairly easy. It was mud turned into snow, snow turned into ice, and eventually we got to a part where there was crevasses. Now, if anyone doesn't know what a crevasse is, this is a chasm, a gorge in the earth, like a fissure in the ground, and sometimes hundreds or even thousands of feet deep. And so the first couple were no big deal, we jumped over them, but it got to the point where there were step ladders, horizontal 20-foot step ladders that we had to walk across to go over these gorges. And if you fell in this thing, you were talking about hundreds of feet fall into a crack where rescue was very unlikely. And it was really at this point that the gravity of what we were doing kind of hit me. And I realized I hadn't trained at all for this. I was, again, 19 and invincible. I said, what could go wrong? So here we were crossing these gorges. Fast forward a couple hours, we hiked about 3 more hours up the side of the mountain. We're about halfway at this point. The lights of the city of Quito off in the distance were now down at this awkwardly steep angle, an angle of which I'd only ever seen from a plane before, but we were on ground. So this was a weird experience, and it was surreal because there was a little bit of snow coming down, everything was muffled, the sound was really quiet, the fresh fallen snow. And we took our first break. I was excited. I'd been thinking about the Nested Crunch chocolate bar that was in my bag and I was going to be devouring any minute. And so I sat down on the edge of the ridge, put my legs over the edge, took my pack off and took the chocolate bar out, set it on the snow, and began to take my gloves off. And that was my first mistake, right? I see the little chocolate bar kind of tip and slide down like a toboggan down the edge of the mountain. And you can imagine the heartbreak in that moment of the thing that I've been looking forward to for the last hour just swoosh out of sight and leave nothing but just a little toboggan trail. So Frank was kind, he had sympathy on me and he gave me a bite of his chocolate bar. We put our stuff on and we kept going back up the mountain. About 2 hours later, we got to the Great Ice Wall, which is this 300-foot just sheer face of stalactites and cascading water, frozen water. We couldn't technically climb up it, so we go around to the right side of it up a ridge. It was the spine of the mountain that would lead us the rest of the way to the summit. And the last, 200 yards of the climb, I was suffering from hypoxia, which is oxygen deprivation at altitude, and it leaves you with these feelings of basically being drunk. I was delusions of grandeur, laughing uncontrollably. I had this King Africa song stuck in my head, the no pare, sigue, sigue, no pare, sigue, sigue. And I just over and over looping in my head. But we made it to the summit, and as we did, I looked back behind me, and the sun was just cresting the horizon on the other side of the mountain. I couldn't see it because we were coming up. At the backside, as I turned around, I saw the most amazing, just pyramid shadow extending the horizon. If you can imagine it, the sun, the tip of the mountain, us, and then the horizon. It's a sight that I don't think, I don't know how many people in the world get to see that, but it was a really privileged thing. So, made it to the top. We had only a few minutes to look over the edge, see the smoking cone of this active volcano, take a few photos, and then the sun was up at this point, so we had to get down. So we put our gear back on. I had a video camera, shot some footage, and we started the way back down, retracing our steps down that ridge line that I talked about. And it was at this point that it got really dicey. Whether it was the hypoxia, the adrenaline of having just been on top, or the fact that my legs were jello after climbing for 7 hours straight, all of the above, in a moment of carelessness, I was not conscious about separating my feet, and the metal spikes, the crampons on my boots, on one stride locked up. And my feet at this point, with my body, the momentum of my body, forward motion, but suddenly my feet were essentially shackled together in place, stationary, and I went over the edge on the left side and started sliding down at about a 70% grade. And I did what they tell you to do, which is throw your ice axe, but at that point I was already sliding, and all it did was kind of mildly slow me down. So in this split second, Frank had the good sense, in his instinct, to dive over the right side of the bridge. And the rope between us is what held us both. He pulled off a heroic, just without thinking about it, threw himself over the right, and we sat suspended on that ridge line, dangling like a towel on a clothesline over the rope, over the ridge. We lived, obviously, and we both climbed back up the mountain, up the ridge, and descended, and I'm out of time, so I'll cut it off there. I would suffer a frostbite on both my big toes. It would be a year before I regained feeling both of them, but we both lived. And I learned 4 things that day. I learned that llamas are assholes, straight up, like, fuck llamas. But I learned that we are capable of so much more than we realize. And you have to decidedly put yourself in uncomfortable situations to remind yourself of that periodically. I learned that that 3, this could be the last day of your life at any point. Like, no one knows. Walking out of here, you can get hit by a car. Like, no one knows when it's the last day of your life, so live it like it is. And number 4, I learned that this is a team effort. Like, had I not been roped into Frank, had he not had the good sense to do what he did in that moment, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And so it is a team effort, and that, even if sometimes it doesn't seem like it, everything you do is in service to or in benefit from another human being. So it's a group effort, and we're all on the same team. Yes, that's my story. Thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Sean.